Hey everyone, my name is Mathew Vermeer from Delft University of Technology. Together with my promoters, Michel van Eeten and Gañán, we have worked on this project called Ruling the Rules, quantifying the evolution of rule sets, alerts, and incidents in network intrusion detection. This is something that I'm very excited to share with you guys, so I'm very grateful that you took a chunk out of your very busy schedule to come hear me talk about this. So let's start off with setting the stage a bit. We all want to be secure on the internet, of course. This has been an endeavor that's been going on for decades, like since the inception of the internet, of course. Only we know, of course, that as the internet has grown bigger and bigger, the amount of attacks on the internet has also grown bigger and bigger, right? We all have a smartphone in our pocket too. We have a laptop, desktop, tablets, smart devices at home. Maybe you have a smart thermostat, a smart fridge, who knows? Tons of devices. But now imagine organizations or governments where they have, in addition to this, also thousands others, or maybe tens of thousands of other devices that are exposed to the internet. And you can already imagine the party that hackers all over the world are having with all of these devices that are exposed to the internet. Now, this evolution, of course, has placed a very big emphasis on the importance of threat monitoring and threat detection. And one of the main systems that is used all over the world to secure networks is, of course, the intrusion detection system, or IDS for short. Now, you have several different types of IDSs. You have the application-based IDS, for example, the host-based IDS, but the one that I'll be focusing on in this presentation is the network-based IDS, which is a system that's usually plugged into a router in a network that analyzes all of the traffic produced by the machines on that network and tries to find potentially malicious traffic within this traffic that is generated by all these machines. Now, within network-based IDSs, or NIDS for short, generally speaking, there are two main types of systems. On the one hand, you have signature-based systems, and on the other hand, you have anomaly-based systems. Signature-based systems, they work by means of rules, and these rules, they tell the system specifically what to look for in network traffic. So, for example, specific byte streams that are very characteristic of a particular exploit, or maybe the order in which packets enter the network that are characteristic of a certain type of C2 server, for example. And on the other hand, we have the anomaly-based systems, which use, for example, statistical-based techniques, or ML, machine learning-based techniques, to create a baseline behavior for a network, and then try to identify deviations in this baseline behavior in order to identify potentially malicious traffic or activity in the network. So there is an issue here, which is that for the past number of years, there's been a big push from the security community to gradually phase out the signature-based systems in favor of the more anomaly-based systems. And the question that we asked ourselves here is, why? Why is it so necessary to phase out these signature-based systems? Because there's a reason why these systems have been part of the foundation of network security for decades already. So we wanted to answer this big why question. And in order to answer this big why question, we needed to investigate very deeply how these signature-based systems work, how effective they are, and all of the processes surrounding the management of these systems, which is something that really hasn't been done up till now. And unfortunately, this is not as straightforward as it seems, because we don't really know how these systems work. We don't know why they work, right? The threat landscape on the internet changes every day, and these signature-based systems, they have to be kept as up-to-date as possible in order to keep up with all the different threats. We also don't know what role the different rule sets play within this process. So how many different rule sets do you need? How many different rules do you need? What effect does the quantity or the quality of these rules, how does that affect the overall security of the organizations that these systems are protecting? And also, finally, how do these security professionals within a security operations center, or SOC, keep these systems working effectively year after year? And then specifically here, with these security professionals, we're interested in one very specific aspect, which is how do they deal with this trade-off that they have to make with maximizing the intrusion detections versus minimizing the number of alerts that the analysts receive on a daily basis, so they don't get overwhelmed by all of these alerts, which would prevent them from actually performing their work effectively. So in order to answer all of these questions, we partnered with a managed security service provider, or MSSP for short. And this MSSP granted us access to their in-house NIDS rule set, which is a rule set that they create themselves within the organization. It's completely proprietary. They also granted us access to the 3 commercial NIDS rule sets that they purchase from different threat intel vendors, and also to the all of the alerts and incidents that all of these rule sets trigger over time. And finally, we also had access to the security analysts that work there, and we were able to perform some interviews. So let me take you very briefly through the workflow that they have set up within this MSSP. So on the left-hand side, we have the rule sets. On the top, we have the commercial rules, which they buy from the threat intel vendors. These are added to their production environment immediately. There is this inherent trust that the rules that these threat intel vendors make are of a certain quality, which is why they're added to the production environment immediately. The in-house rules, however, many of them are added to a testing environment first in order to check whether they're functioning well, they're not producing too much false positives, for example, and only once they're deemed acceptable are they added to the production environment. But also, depending on how critical the rule is or how severe the vulnerability is that it's trying to protect, some in-house rules are added to the production environment immediately and are updated and tested in production. So once these rules are in production, they are pushed to all of the sensors in their customers' networks. And these sensors, right, these NIDSs, they continually monitor the network traffic of the customers. And once a rule is triggered, the alert that it triggers is sent back to the SOC, the Security Operations Center, where an analyst investigates these alerts. And if these alerts are deemed critical enough, they are upgraded to an incident. And these incidents are then further investigated to see if incident response is necessary. So with all of this data, we first had to create a tool that is able to track the rule set evolution of all of these different rule sets over time in the Git repositories where they are hosted within the organization. So this tool is able to track all of the new rules that are added to the rule sets, the rules that are updated, deleted, disabled, all of those different cases. Now, we can combine this rule set data with the alert and incident data And once we combined this, we were able to calculate many, many different statistics that shed light upon the rule set management process and, of course, the organizational security. And finally, we were able to cross-validate these insights that we gained from the data analysis section of this study using the interviews that we performed with the many different security analysts within the MSSP. So now I'd like to very briefly show you a couple of interesting results that we found from this, from our analysis. First of which is that we found that the custom rule set that the MSSP creates in-house is very important for the proper functioning of a network intrusion detection system. So first of all, we found that the precision of the MSSP rule set is higher than the commercial rule sets. And even though the MSSP rule set is much smaller than the commercial rule sets, as we can see in this graph here, this blue one on the bottom is the MSSP. It comes to about a maximum of 2,000 rules, which is much, much smaller than, for example, the ET Pro-Snort rule set, which comes up to over 50,000 rules. So despite this rule set being much smaller, these rule sets are present in 27% of all true positive incidents. So we found then, of course, that this, even though the commercial rule sets have huge coverage, the MSSP rule set is very much complementary to these commercial rule sets and provide as much value, if not more, than these commercial rule sets, which is also something that was interestingly validated by the interviews that we performed. Next up, I want to show you this pretty graph. So what we have here is the age of rules plotted against the incidents that a particular rule of this age will trigger on average per week. So, for example, we have a rule here that would be for a week old. This week-old rule would then, on average, produce around 4 incidents per week. And what this tells us is that it's the newest rules that produce the most incidents, which emphasizes the need, of course, for the maintaining rule sets as up-to-date as possible to the threat landscape globally. And finally, I wanted to show you this sort of visual representation of all the alerts and incidents and how they are condensed into incidents and true positive incidents. And finally, successful attacks. So for the data that we have that spans around 13 years, we have 62 million alerts that the analysts in the Security Operations Center processed. And they were able to condense these 62 million alerts into 150,000 incidents. So a big jump there. Out of these 150,000 incidents, they were again condensed to 69,000 true positive incidents. And finally, out of these 69,000, only 106 of these incidents turned out to be successful attacks. And the very interesting thing here is that 99.8% of these true positive incidents were discovered by the analysts in the SOC before they were able to cause any serious damage to the organizations that these analysts are protecting on a day-to-day basis. So with all of these results, we were able to demonstrate that signature-based systems are still effective in the modern internet, given that they are managed properly, for example, by keeping them up to date with the newest threat intelligence. Of course, future work is still needed to compare the signature-based approach to other different type of intrusion detection approaches, be they other network-based approaches or host-based approaches or application-based approaches, for example. And only once that comparison is done will we be able to determine whether these signature-based systems really do need to be phased out or not. And then again, only then will we be able to know whether these signature-based systems are archaic and obsolete pieces of technology, or they remain an indispensable part of our network security.